Hey, what is going on, guys? It's the SS Ultimate Goku back in the video, and today I'm going to be doing my Venom Let There Be Carnage um, review. So I have to let you guys know right now, it'll be in the title, as well as me telling you right now, if you haven't seen the film, get out of here right now because we are spoiling. This is a spoiler video. So, yeah. Um, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get out of here, or so hold your peace. You know what I mean? Um, anyways, now that that's all settled for all the people that are still here that have seen the film, um, I did get to go see it yesterday on the last screening of the night. Um, I will say this right now: the film was better than the last one with the fight scenes and the graphics and the way they went about the film. Um, it was a step up from the first film. The one thing I didn't like about this film, and I mean we'll get into all this stuff when the story when I go through the review here, but the one thing I did not like about this film is the interaction between Eddie Brock and Anne. Um, I did not like the fact that those two did not get back together at the end of the story, um, because it was heavily implied in the first film, at the end of the first film, that they were going to get back together. Um, and, Dan, the doctor, walking away with Anne, I thought was bullshit. I thought the doctor was going to get killed by Carnage, and that didn't happen. I thought it was gonna be like a Terminator 3 situation where like when Catherine Brewster's fiance got killed by the TX, and then Eddie and Anne were gonna get back together. I did not like this story arc of those two not getting back together and her walking away at the end there. But outside of that, that was pretty much the only thing I didn't like about this movie. I just didn't like that idea that Eddie and Anne didn't get back together, especially with the comic book accuracy of them because they were married. Uh, so I did not like that at all. Um, so let's get into this movie. So there's a couple new cats we got in this movie, and there's a lot of big stuff coming in. But this movie started off pretty much where the first movie left off. Well, actually, I should say there was actually a flashback first before we get to where the movie left off, where they flash back to '96, where uh, Cletus Cassidy and I'm trying to remember her name. I never knew about this character before. Her name is Benson. Let's see. I had it pulled up right here. Her name is Frances Brunson, aka Shriek. And I'm just gonna say this right now. The character is completely inaccurate to the character that I researched before making this video because I was looking at because I didn't know who Shriek was, and so I had to look her up just to make sure I knew what we were dealing with here for the sake of this video. And the movie does her a little not justice, but I guess they kind of could get away with it since no one really knew anything about Shriek. I guess that's why they did it. It was because no one really knew anything about Shriek. For one thing, they did race bend her, so if you don't like source material characters, um, they did it here. That's number one. Number two, they didn't put a star on her eye or whatever. She's supposed to have a star, not like a scar thing. So there's that, and then she doesn't get to wear the uniform that she wears. She never wears the uniform, I guess, or whatever that she's supposed to have. Um, she almost kind of looks like when I was looking at her, I was like, she almost kind of looks like Raven in a way. Uh, but obviously more villainy, since she's clearly a villain and Raven isn't. But that's kind of what she reminded me of when I looked at her like comic book picture. Um, but yeah, they completely changed the character from what I've looked at. Um, for Shriek, so I'm sure some people might not be happy about that. Um, but she's not that much known as a character, so I guess that's why they thought they could like change the character. So yeah, they started this off with her and Cletus Cassidy, as kids, like they were in asylum as kids. I guess that was the story arc they were going for. I don't think this was accurate in the comic books from what I've looked up. They met each other as adults, not kids. But when they started off in the asylum, they basically had Carnage and Francis Burnson, like they were like in the next rooms together, basically, and then they got split up. Um, she was transferred away. Um, Kalidas didn't like this. So he's a psychotic serial killer, so he's not going to be happy about this. So she was transferred away, and while she was being transferred away, you had Mulligan, aka Patrick Mulligan, but he's never actually called Patrick Mulligan. He's just called Mulligan in this, who's a cop. At this point in '96, we find this out later, but I'm just going to talk about it now since we do find this out later in the film. That he is there as the cop, transferring her, Shriek, and basically she uses her yelling power abilities, and this basically leaves him deaf in one ear, and that's only because he actually shoots her, which also Mulligan thinks that she was killed, um, but in reality she was just sent to a secret asylum that no one knows about. So in the official report, he killed her, and he thought he had killed her because he physically had seen it when he had last, seen it before he got knocked out. Um, so yeah, that was how they set up the origins for these two characters. Then we go to present day, which is it really present day in the Venomverse? Because this movie's supposed to take place right after the events of the first film, so not exactly sure if it takes exactly in the literal present day, but nonetheless, we go to present day, and you got Venom, who's talking to Mulligan and asking him to, interview Cletus again, because that's the only person he wants to talk to. He gives him this weird story to Eddie, and obviously Venom doesn't like this. He doesn't like him and whatnot, and so they end up, not really getting anywhere with it. And Mulligan is on Eddie all the time and is basically like, you need to help us so you can get back on track and all this stuff, yada yada yada. And Mulligan is just coming up to Eddie Brock. eventually figures out what happened, and he basically reveals where Carnage's victims were. Um, and this ends up leading to him being sentenced to death, um, for good. You know, the death sentence and whatnot. So, Mulligan is not happy about this. But, you know, he's just like, whatever, you know, they solved it. Meanwhile, while this is all going on, you know, Venom and Eddie are having their issues. They're pissed off with each other because Venom has to eat brains, and Eddie told him he could eat bad guy brains. And so Venom wants to eat some bad guys, basically. He wants to eat some bad guys. And Eddie's like, look, you know, people are going to get suspicious of shit if you do that. You know, eat some of these chickens, basically. And he's like, no, their brains are not big enough, and whatnot. And so he's complaining about it. Meanwhile, Eddie meets his ex-fiance Anne at this restaurant, and this is where they reveal that her and Dr. Dan are now going to be married. And so Venom's not happy about this because he doesn't like Dan, and Eddie Brock is just kind of upset about it. And again, as I said earlier, this is the thing about the movie I absolutely hated. I'm gonna tell it like it is. I thought it was incredibly stupid. You know, especially since Dan is not even like a real character in the comic books. Like, this is like a made up character for the movie. Like, so it's a throwaway character that could have been killed off easily, if they wanted to. So I was quite disappointed by this. As I said earlier, we get into it more. We'll get into more as the story progresses, but nonetheless, for me personally, I just did not like this. And, yeah. So after that whole thing, Venom, or not Venom, Cletus Cassidy is sentenced to death, as we said earlier. He sends a pen pal mail to Eddie Brock. Hear about the death penalty and whatnot, so he ends up going back. He ends up going back there, and basically there's a confrontation, and it gets really maddening, and Eddie puts his hands on the bars, and this leads to Cletus Cassidy biting him. And by biting him, you know, he's like, I've tasted blood before, and that is not blood. And, you know, they walk away, and, you know, that's really the end of that sequence. Later in that day, of course, you know, as, you know, Cletus Cassidy is being sentenced to death and basically about to die in the lethal injection, this is where Carnage is revealed inside of him, and Cletus Cassidy becomes Carnage, and breaks out. Meanwhile, while this is all happening, later in that day, Eddie Brock is home, and he is basically broken away from Venom because they just can't get along. And so he breaks away, and Venom then destroys his $2,000 TV, as they mentioned earlier, as well as his motorcycle. This was not something Eddie Brock liked, to put that kindly. So, he goes away and he basically starts switching into other people, which, as we all know, the other people couldn't really tolerate Venom. So he keeps, for a while in the film, Venom keeps switching to different people, you know, because they couldn't last that long with him. So, meanwhile, after this, you got Carnage. Um, he then goes on to bust out Frances Benson, Shriek, from her what's it called? The asylum that the secret asylum she is in. They did like the little troll thing, and that Carnage was here. Carnage, like after he busted out of his, jail prison, um, he stole one of the red cars or whatever, an older classic car, and Carnage made a deal with Cletus Cassidy that they would free her first, and then would go after Eddie Brock afterwards. Venom. So they free him. While they're freeing him, she does her yelling power, which Carnage is obviously weak to sound, so he says, "Don't ever do that again, I'll eat you." They also then set up a wedding thing. Meanwhile, Venom, or Eddie, was confronted by Mulligan about certain stuff and what he had done, and he just said he didn't know anything about it. Not too long after that, he ends up being howled in by Mulligan in the interrogation room. And he basically says, like, I don't know anything again, and he wants his phone call. He calls up Anne, who's a lawyer, obviously, and, they have client privilege and whatnot, so they're talking about the whole thing with Venom. So he says, "You gotta go get Venom." She then she goes out to find Venom, who is at the store, the grocery store, or the gas station store. I don't exactly know what that store was, but I think it's either a convenience store or a gas station store. But where the clerk is at, the Venom gets into the clerk, who knows about Eddie Brock and Venom. She's in there, and eventually he goes into Anne, and Anne comes back with the symbiote, and we get to see She-Venom again for a brief moment before Venom goes back into Eddie Brock. She-Venom actually, Anne busts Eddie Brock out of the interrogation room, and then after that, they do the whole apology shtick thing, and then that's when it leads to Eddie Brock and Venom getting back together, and being in the symbiote again. So then they go to the wedding, which is Carnage, or Cletus Cassidy, and Shriek are about to basically get married. And they basically are holding up the father. One of the funny things was when Venom busted in, Carnage was like, I have to kill you, only one of us can survive, father. And so then the priest's father, basically was like, wait, no, don't. And he's like, not you, father. that father. And it was, so then they start fighting. Great fight scenes. They end up killing the father, by the way, which, you know, is what it is. There was also some good kill scenes from Carnage. A lot of people were worried about Carnage, not being rated R, but there was some pretty good kill scenes in the movie. I gotta say, leading up to the fight. They're fighting. Meanwhile, while that's going on, Shriek is like, she's fighting Mulligan. She actually ended up fighting Mulligan. She actually, Mulligan was like shocked because he's like, I killed you. He's like, I killed you. He's like, no, you didn't. And so then she's just trying to like finish him off. Basically, she was like, an eye for an eye. Type deal. Venom and Carnage fights off because Carnage had held Anne hostage. That's why they ended up going there, by the way, I should say, was because she held Anne hostage. She had kidnapped her, basically, and that's what led to Eddie Brock and Venom going there. So they go there. He's threatening to kill her, and like Dan's like, "Come on, you gotta go." And there was also a scene right before that where it seemed like Carnage was gonna kill Dr. Dan, and Venom saved him, which I thought was just dumb. I thought Carnage was going to kill him, because I just thought that would have made the most sense. Because I don't know how you do a character that's not even in the comic books gets to get with Anne, who's supposed to be Eddie Brock's like wife. In the actual comic books, they do get married. So I just thought that was again quite dumb. Story arc right there. So Carnage is like damaging Venom, because Venom does get a hold of Anne, and like he's trying to like prevent Anne from falling down to her death. So he's like slowly slowly getting her down until to the point where Dan could catch like her, because even if Dan couldn't have caught her at that point, she would have fallen down. She wouldn't have like hurt herself, or she wouldn't have died from that. She may have gotten a bump though. So she protects him, or he protects. It protects her, the Venom symbiote. And then after that, Venom continues fighting off Carnage. As like I said, when Mulligan seems to be about to be killed off by Frances Benson, Shriek, she like goes after Venom, and she ends up falling down, and ends up getting, I guess, killed with the bell thing. The bell fell on top of her. It was not kind of quite clear if she actually died or not. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't, I don't know. But Venom then basically gets a hold of Carnage, takes him out as they're falling down. Carnage is basically out of Cletus Cassidy, and symbiote's trying to get back to Cletus Cassidy, but before he can, you got Venom and Eddie Brock pulls up the symbiote and then just immediately eats him. He eats the symbiote, which to me is just kind of weird. Like, why couldn't you just done that the Riot? If that was the case, like, oh, if we could actually eat the symbiote, then like, why couldn't we have done that with Riot? You know, but nonetheless, he eats him, and then right after that, you see Cletus Cassidy like, I just wanted a friendship with you, and none of the people were buying it. Venom or Eddie Brock, and then Venom was just like, enough with this, I'm sick of this guy, and then just immediately eats Cletus Cassidy. Um, so Cletus Cassidy, Carnage is dead. They're gone. I was kind of disappointed that they killed him off after that. I was kind of hoping that, they would make him imply that he was dead, but managed to survive for like the third film. Especially with the meetup. If they're going to do a Spider-Man Venom meetup, that kind of was the disappointing part of it. But nonetheless, Carnage is gone. Willie Harrison, I thought, did a great job with Carnage. The first ever Carnage in any cinematic film. They've never had a Carnage in a cinematic film before, so I thought this is a really good job. This is the first time. Venom had an appearance prior to Venom, so which wasn't that great, but still, this is the first time Carnage has ever been on the big screen. So I thought Woody Harrelson did a great job with the character, and his performance should be clapped about. I love that performance. Nonetheless, he dies. And also again, once Anne is freed, she walks away with Dan. They have this whole conversation. Because now Venom is on the run, or Eddie Brock is on the run, because everybody knows now that Eddie Brock is Venom. My question here, though, is if everybody knows that Venom is Eddie Brock, why aren't they going after Anne too? Because Anne was his lawyer. So obviously she knew stuff about what was going on. Even Mulligan had pointed this out, because Mulligan, in the interrogation room, he had showed pictures of them all together, talking about this when Anne was present, like at the Lobster restaurant and whatnot in the first movie. So, why isn't, Anne on the run, too? Obviously she knew stuff. She was his lawyer, right? So, client, lawyer privilege, but obviously she knew stuff. The police has to know this. The police are not idiots. They have to know this. I mean, if Mulligan knew this, then obviously all the other police people knew about this. All the other detectives knew about this. So, because now I guess, because Mulligan's a detective now. He was a police officer in '96, but now he's a detective in this. Also, they did show Mulligan with kind of eyes very similar to Francis Benson, Shriek. And he says monsters and all this stuff. Now, Mulligan is actually supposed to be Patrick Mulligan. He's supposed to be Toxic, which is an offspring to Carnage symbiote. But Carnage is killed off, so I don't know how they can do that. Now, I know a lot of people will probably say that, well, when Carnage choked, or when Toxic choked Carnage, or Carnage was being choked by Mulligan, that could have led to a symbiote being created in him. But the thing is Carnage was doing that to a bunch of different people. So why is Mulligan different from all the other people that Carnage choked? You know what I'm saying? How did they get a symbiote, but Mulligan did? The only way it could work is if they showed I guess in the next film they show something where while he was being choked that he actually accidentally bit it, but it's quite clear that, when we seen it, it didn't happen that way. So, yeah, they really kind of, I don't know, and again, at the end of this, it felt like he was getting more powers like Frances Benson, because both of his eyes were looked like Shriek's one eye, basically, with the blue glowing and stuff like that. It didn't look like he was becoming toxic or anything like that. So like I said, I don't know what they're doing with that. So that's basically where the movie kind of ends. Venom and Eddie Brock are then on a beach at the end talking and doing their own thing, basically, as being one on the run, basically. So then they do the ending credits, the big, which, by the way, the ending credits, like the first part of it was really cool looking. I love the graphics for that. Then after that, they do some cutscene, which at the beginning it was quite weird because they were showing some people that didn't speak English, and it was quite weird, but it was actually just Eddie Brock and Venom watching a television set, or television station in Spanish, I guess, or something. And then Venom basically tells Eddie Brock while they're in Hawaii, I'm guessing they're in Hawaii, in a hotel in Hawaii, based on what they're wearing. And basically tells him that there's other universes out there and whatnot. And then there is this whole light thing, and after the light thing, they're like, Eddie Brock's like, what happened? What happened? And he's like, and Venom's like, I don't know what happened. And then the TV station is on a different channel, and you see, I guess, the stuff from the Far From Home film, which shows Spider-Man, James Jonas Jameson, character, Jonas Jameson, and you see Spider-Man, clearly Tom Holland's Spider-Man, for Peter Parker, and then you see Venom he's like, I like this guy, and then he just licks the TV and whatnot. And then at the end of the cutscene, you basically see a random guy entering the room, and he's basically saying, well, why are you in my room? And then Eddie Brock just tries to come up with an excuse and whatnot. And that's the end of it. So at the end of the film, basically I can conclude, Venom is officially in the MCU. Yes, it is. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what the arguments are. I know there are going to be some people that are going to say, oh, no, it's just a join in or this or that. No. They're in the MCU. They specifically let you know they're in the MCU because they even said there's multiple universes. They show Peter Parker, the Peter Parker that is in that MCU universe. They showed that. That's the MCU. And I had talked about this on Discord. I had talked about this for a while, that I had a feeling that Venom 2 takes place chronologically after the events of the third Spider-Man film that's about to come out in December, No Way Home. And what I think this represents right here, the whole bolt of light, where they basically go to a different universe and whatnot, I think that's basically Doctor Strange doing the spell with Spider-Man, where Spider-Man, wants to forget about his identity or whatever, so everyone forgets and whatnot. At that moment, when that happens, that triggers the events of Venom to going into a different universe, because look exactly what happens. There's a bolt of light. And that's kind of what they showed in the trailer for No Way Home, was Spider-Man, Doctor Strange. They're doing this whole, whole spell and there's like a light thing going on. And so at that moment, that triggers the universes where they collide. Now, I don't know if this only applies to Venom. This could apply to Anne. I don't know exactly who leaves to go to a different universe because, again, they only show Venom on screen, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Venom's the only one who leaves to go to the MCU because, again, obviously Venom and Eddie Brock didn't really do anything to go there. He didn't do anything to go there. There was literally a bolt of light, and now all of a sudden they're in a different universe, but they're in the same building. They're in the same building that they were in, but they're in a different universe. They're in a different universe, and why they're in a different universe? Because in the universe that they are now in, which is the MCU, they didn't rent out that room. When they were in the Venomverse, they had rented out the room. They had rented out the room because it was on a different TV station that he was watching. But when the bolt of light happened, the station was different. They were on the news, which that's how they got to see Spider-Man, Peter Parker, which is also what led to the random guy coming out and saying, "Why are you in my room?" Because he rented out the room in this universe, not Eddie Brock. And so that's another thing that I don't think people realized is he rented out that random guy rented out the room in the MCU. So that building exists in the MCU. That hotel or motel exists in the MCU, but Eddie Brock didn't rent it out because he didn't exist in the MCU. So now, that's where I think everything's going to go. I think everything is going to go. Spider-Man or Venom 3 is, I think it's going to be probably titled Venom versus Spider-Man, is probably going to be in the MCU. Unless Spider-Man decides to go into the Venomverse. But that wouldn't make sense because Venom is now in the MCU. So yeah, that is where that is at. Interestingly enough, where do I think this movie stands? I love the movie. Again, really the only thing I hated was the Anne and Eddie Brock arc of them not getting back together. And they might get back together in the third film if Anne gets transferred to the universe. Like that'd be if Anne gets transferred to the MCU and the Doctor does not. Because again, Eddie didn't do anything to go to the universe. So maybe Anne goes to the universe as well, without the Doctor, since the Doctor never maybe it's maybe it's a symbiote thing because Anne had the symbiote in her. Maybe she is allowed to go to the MCU, but no one else is. Maybe that's what happens. Because again, it does make sense because again, there were multiple random characters from different universes that went to Spider-Man No Way Home. Green Goblin, all these other villains that are confirmed, so far, are now in the MCU where Spider-Man is. So it could be the same thing that happened to Eddie Brock, and it could be the same thing that happens to Anne because they have symbiotes that they're allowed to go there. And that could happen with Toxic as well too. Now, Toxic, I don't know what they're gonna do with Patrick Mulligan, in terms of if they're going to introduce a Toxic character or not in the third film. Maybe a fourth film if they decide to do a fourth film. I don't exactly know where he fits in. Because personally, in my opinion, I think Toxic was a backup plan in case they couldn't get Spider-Man in the second film as a cameo to introduce from being in the third film, because in the original MCU Spider-Man contract that Sony signed on for the character was that Spider-Man couldn't appear at all in non-MCU films while their contract agreement was in place. But with the short-term contract that they got recently after the first one expired, was that Spider-Man could appear in the MCU as well as in the Venomverse, the MCU Spider-Man. So because of this, I don't know if they're going to use Toxic or not. They might, since Spider-Man and Venom aren't really villains. Well, Spider-Man obviously isn't a villain, but Venom, even in his like universe, at least the Venom that they're establishing in this movie, he is not a villain. He is not a villain. I mean, it's quite clear they established that he's not a villain. Okay, he's more of a hero and obviously an anti-hero, but he's more of a hero than anything else. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do when this version of Venom goes up against Spider-Man, who's a hero, and Venom in this is more of a hero, but also an anti-hero as well. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that. Toxic could be the villain, to interrupt them, while they're doing their fight, but nonetheless, I'm not sure. It's kind of hard. I think we gave the last film a 9. This film, I probably have to give it right at a 9. Right there with, I believe, the first film that I rated a 9 out of 10. The only reason why I wouldn't give this a perfect score is because of the Anne and Eddie Brock dynamic. I just was really disappointed in that. I did not like that those two didn't get a happy ending. Maybe they will in the third film. Maybe Anne goes to the MCU, and the Doctor cannot. I do not know how that's going to exactly work. But overall, this was a good film. I thought all the actors did pretty good. I know probably a lot of people will probably be disappointed with certain things. Again, like I said, I'm disappointed that Eddie and Anne didn't get with each other because, again, they are actually married in the actual comic books. So that kind of upsets me. I'm sure a lot of people are not going to be happy about the Shriek thing, because from what I looked up, Shriek is nothing like her character. And Carnage and Shriek seems to be, from what I looked up, they don't really have a love interest, so to speak. They kind of were more acquaintance from what I looked at. They weren't actually, lovers in the comic books from what I looked up. So, people can correct me on that if I'm not right about that, but from what I looked up, I briefly looked up some stuff, and it seems like Shriek and Carnage were not actually lovers like they are depicted in this movie. I guess they did that for more drama and suspense. But that was one of the things too. Again, Shriek looked nothing like her actual character. She's supposed to have a star or something on her face, and she didn't have an outfit at all. She didn't have she just had regular, clothes and stuff like that. She never once had her actual suit that she wears or whatever. So that was another thing that I noticed, that they never really were true to the character at all. About Shriek, I'm not sure is dead or alive. They didn't definitively say that she's dead or alive, so she could possibly be in the next movie. They don't show definitively that she's dead, or she's dead, but Carnage does get killed, and Cletus Cassidy gets killed. So if she is alive, she's definitely going to be wanting blood, because they were actually legitimate lovers. The one thing that I will say, which was quite interesting, was they kind of made Cletus more of a caring person, because when the going got tough, even though Cletus Cassidy was a serial killer and was remorseful for people, he loved Francis Bennett. Like, they literally showed him say to like, he was like coming out of Carnage, his head. He was like, no, 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 you know, like, they legitimately loved each other, despite everything. Usually when you see serial killers and type of stories like these, they don't have any sympathy. But he had. I mean, obviously, he only had sympathy for her, no one else. But that was the quite thing, the change that I thought was quite interesting in this film. Again, a little not accurate to the comic books, but I think they did this more for suspense, especially if she is alive still. So she could actually come in and be a villain against Venom if she's now in the MCU universe and is still alive. Again, they could also go with the toxic angle as well. They create that whole thing for her later on that they could do. So there is a couple options that are on the table for her, as well as the toxin arc, possibly for the next film. If they need like a villain to intervene between Venom and Spider-Man's fight, where I do believe Venom is going to merge with Peter Parker at some point, because then when he merges back with Eddie Brock, they can finally get that spider thing on the symbiote, which up to this point they do not have. That's probably the ultimate end goal for that. But nonetheless, overall good film. Let me know what you guys think. Comment, rate. If you like this video or my videos, please subscribe. Make sure to hit that notification bell for all the latest contents. And what do you guys think? Did you guys like this video? Let me know what you guys think about this. But yeah, I'm out of here. Let there be carnage. Venom. I'm the SS Ultimate Goku. I'm out of here. Peace.